Well, I'd like to invite to the stage Mark Halliday. If you're still here, come on up. And Kendall and Donna Hughes, come up please. And Shirley Smith, and I don't know, is Paul Rutledge here? He was supposed to be, but I know. If not, come up, Shirley. And in Transformational Ministries, we just like to celebrate what we see God doing in particular churches with the hope that their tribe would increase. And Mark serves at the Bear Memorial Church of God in Roaring Spring, Pennsylvania. And we've just noticed over the years that this has become a church that takes discipleship very seriously. One of the things that excites us most is this last year, they began to partner the young people in their church with adults in their church with the hope that they would be discipled and mentored and walk shoulder to shoulder with someone in the faith. From being a youth ministry vet for 20 years and knowing how some of our things have failed in youth ministry, we believe this is one of the things that works and we need to see more of. And Mark, the real fruit has been, as we sat around and talked to the staff, not only have you taken discipleship seriously, but the fruit of that is you're sending disciples out. Andy and Teresa Snyder and their family serving in Haiti. Christina Miles serving in Mozambique for the last year. The Reeve girls, Jen Reeve Beislein, who serves with her husband Rodney in the United Church of God, United Community Church of God in the Allegheny region. Her sister Erin, who was my assistant here at the General Conference office a couple of years ago. Ryan and Carla Myers are at Manassas, Liberty Community Church in Manassas, Virginia, who led an Acts team to Haiti for us this last year. That we just see how you've been committed to this, and we want your tribe to increase. And so we're presenting to you the Transformational Ministry Award, presented to Bear Memorial Church of God in recognition of making and sending disciples. And we want your tribe. Kendall and Donna serve at the Leadwood Church of God, which has a legacy. All I knew of Leadwood for many, many years was it seemed like half the denomination came from Leadwood to go into some sort of vocational ministry. And then I visited Leadwood in my teens and thought, well, now maybe I know why I would follow God to escape the hills of Missouri. Some might say that about Central Illinois too. But a lot of churches would rest in that history and look back into that history and kind of pine for those days. Your congregation isn't doing that. In the past 4 or 5 years, sorry, this is going to be tough. We've seen you become a leader in reaching out and loving and seeking the peace of the city. You've done that through an after-school tutoring program that the church hosts. You've opened up a food pantry. You've started a community lunch program that you feed people in need. Where the people of your little small town in the Lead Belt, in many ways has economic challenges and all kinds of challenges that most of us wouldn't want to face. You're one of those churches that I believe people in your community are saying, thank God these folks are here. And not only that, you're also a sending congregation. If you, Ken and Betty McIntyre, you loan out to Haiti at different times of the year. David Abashan, who was your associate, you sent off and released him to another church and serve, and we want your tribe to increase. And so we're presenting you a Transformational Ministry Award to the Leadwood First Church of God in recognition of seeking the peace and the prosperity of the city that we're in. We want your tribe to increase. You are an elder at the Rising Sun First Church of God. And Rising Sun, as I've come to know them, Paul served there now for, I believe, 17 years, a long time. They're one of those churches that were missional before we ever knew what that was. And just lovely stories of how you've partnered in your community. You have lots of partnerships with the local schools, where your church has become known as that church. If the school needs something, they come to you, and you've done that in lots of different ways and serving their needs. The school recently has come to them. They're in the process of finishing a beautiful new facility, and they'd like to start a preschool there. And one of your major pushes into your community, you run a midweek club called Kids for Christ, that, from what I understand, most of the kids are from the neighborhood, not necessarily from the congregation. And here's the kicker, folks. Last Christmas, the local school had a middle school band concert scheduled for the same night as the Kids for Christ Christmas program. And the local school, on their own volition, because they see the value of what our brothers and sisters in Rising Sun are doing, decided to back up the start time to their band concert so that families could go to both programs. They're in the process of finishing a beautiful new multi-purpose facility, and I hear from their leaders constantly that their hope and prayer for this facility is that it would be the community center of Rising Sun. That it's not about them and their building and protection. They want this to be used and utilized, and so we've given you a award, the Transformational Ministry Award, presented to the Rising Sun First Church of God, in recognition of your congregation seeking the peace and the prosperity of the city. May your God be praised. You have my written report, and many of you have had to listen to me at your various regions, so I'm not going to highlight very much of what we've done. Instead, if you'll see, we have hot pink little squares on your table. I'd like you to take a look at that. 14 years ago or so, I had a former parishioner that served as the librarian of Jacobs Elementary School, which is around the corner here from us, who began to, put it politely, harass me to come to her school and mentor with some of the children in her school. And I held Sandy at bay for quite a while because I don't like kids generally, and I'm busy, and I had lots of excuses why that wasn't a good idea, but she persisted, and I finally relented and began to take a lunch hour a week and go read the two children, and God has just done wonderful things in me and through me with that. But 4 or 5 years ago, the reading mentor organizer who organizes mentors and matches them with kids came in the middle of the year and said, "Lance, we have to make a switch, and you're going to get Kyle, and I'm sorry." And I'm like, okay. And then I went to the classroom the first day to pick up Kyle, and the teacher is a friend of mine. And she said, "Who do you need?" I said, "I need Kyle." And she looked and said, "I'm sorry." And Kyle lived up to the billing. In 10 or 12 years, or however 30, 40 kids I worked with, Kyle's in the top 2 or 3 most difficult. He was just a handful and always a challenge. And one day, that probably changed my life more than I realized. We were sitting there and we were working on sentences, and Kyle had written 2 sentences. He wrote, "I love my mom, I love my dad." I said, "Kyle, those are great sentences. That's awesome work. Let's start a sentence now with another word other than I. Let's try something like the." And Kyle wrote before me, "The cops came and took my dad to jail." And that moment, that's forever changed me. Sorry. Because you see, I've come to the realization that in my community and in your communities, there are countless kids like Kyle that are growing up in situations that weren't by their own choosing, weren't by their own doing, who are far from God, and the likelihood of them ever wandering into our church buildings is slim to none. One of my favorite passages of Scripture is Isaiah 65, where Isaiah is painting the picture of the kingdom realized, the new heaven and the new earth, that Jesus will come and restore all things to make them what God intended them to be. And there's a line in there that drives me, that haunts me, that says, "They will not labor in vain or bear children doomed to misfortune." And in our communities, there's countless kids that are doomed to misfortune, that aren't going to come to us. That to make them come to us makes them do the missionary work rather than us do the missionary work. And so what I want to encourage you to think about today is, my fear is you'll walk away from this session and say, we've heard lots of great things and we heard lots of inspiring stories, and that would be great if we could be a part of it, but you don't know where to start. And so this little pink sheet that's in front of you, with Transformational Ministries, we want to help you find a way to start, to take a step, to begin to move towards God's mission and what He might have for you in your neck of the woods. It may look very different than what He's doing through me in my neck of the woods, but we want to help you get movement, to begin to move towards that and not just walk away saying, we heard about some great stuff this week. And so you see 4 things there that I'm just going to highlight briefly and then sit down. The Missional Leadership Initiative. Many of you have heard about this. It's a dual purpose of bringing health and wholeness and soul care to leaders, as well as helping leaders understand how to transition churches into a ministry where we move out towards people rather than expecting that they'll come to us. And some of you here, maybe that's your next step. Maybe that's what you need to do. Others of you are here that maybe you need to influence another leader to say, you need to be in this next one that launches in January of 2014. To host a What's Coming Down the Pike experience that we love to live in the past in the church. We struggle sometimes to live in the present. We don't often look forward in the future. And we have an experience that helps your church look forward 15 years to understand the culture and where things are moving and some of the challenges that we're going to face so that we can adapt and be prepared instead of just react and pine for the days of the past. And maybe that's a place to start, is for your church to say, we want to host that and help our folks to understand our culture better and how we can be better prepared to be the people of God where God has planted us for this moment. You've heard a lot about coaching the last several years, and we have Brian Miller, who's been a champion for us in this area of the country, and Chad Shute in the East. And coaching is very simply helping people move from where they're at to where God wants them to be. That I believe, and you'll hear Justin say this and others, that God has sprinkled God-sized dreams throughout this whole place, and many times we don't know where to start. We're overwhelmed. We don't know how to begin to move. And some of you, maybe that means you need to begin to engage having a coach who coaches you and helps you work through that. Some of you, your next step may be to go to a coach training and learn what that's about. But that may be something that's for you. This is how we start to move towards this. And then finally, I'm convinced that discipleship is one of the key issues that we've got to get on top of. That Mike Breen says that if you build the church, sometimes you get disciples, but if you make disciples, you always get the church. And all the dreams and visions and all the things we'd like to see happen in our tribe, I think rest on, are we making disciples? Are we seeing people's lives transformed by Jesus? Let's go out and do the same in the lives of others. And for the last 2 or 3 years, there's been several of us that have been partnering with Mike Breen and a group called 3DM that I think has given us a model that helps us do a better job of making disciples. And so for some of you, maybe that's to begin bringing some of us in to help disciple, help your people understand that so they can begin to do it. There are other ways to explore that option. But in those 4 options today, I'd like you to take just a brief moment and say, God, what step do you want me to take? And if you'd be so kind just to mark that down and to put your name on it and to leave that on the table. And after this is over, we'll be collecting those, and then we'll be getting in touch with you in the next couple of months to see how do we begin to help you move from just, that was a great conference, and we heard inspiring stories, and we'd love to see that happen, to where you help lead people onto God's mission to take the next step into what God has for them. And so I just ask you to prayerfully consider before you leave today to let us know what of those, or we've given you another option of other. Maybe there's another way that we can serve you. We'd love to come partner with you and help you understand how it is we move people onto God's mission and do the work He's called us to do. Thank you so much for your friendship and your love and for the privilege of serving you. And God bless you.